Upfront and Outspoken with Bob Williams. If you love the Constitution,
man is not free unless government is limited.
if you love freedom,
As government expands, liberty contracts.
if you believe in personal responsibility, if you believe America is still the greatest nation on earth, then get ready for an experience you'll never forget. This is Upfront and Outspoken. Here's your host, Bob Williams.
Some folks are born made to wave the flag. Ooh, they're red, white, and blue.
And welcome back. This is, of course, Upfront Outspoken. I'm your host, Bob Williams, with you here on this Monday. Yep, the Monday, the 29th day of December. The year is almost behind us. What can I tell you? A little bit ago, you heard former mayor of New York City, Rudy Giuliani, talk about an issue. A very important issue. As everybody knows, 2 police officers were literally assassinated while sitting in their patrol car. And since then, tensions have been on the rise in New York City against police officers. And many of those men and women in blue turned their back on the current mayor, de Blasio, when he was at the funeral of one of the slain officers. So the question comes up. Do you support our men and women in blue, or are you going to be one of the ones like Giuliani said, that, or that was seen? I shouldn't say that was Giuliani said, but people have seen that turn their back on our men and women in blue. Is race going to be a factor in what happens? And I have to agree with what Giuliani said. If you are someone that is condemning the actions of a organization, let's say you're against the Ferguson race riots, or you're in support of our police departments and all of this, you do not want somebody sitting next to you that gives this aura of just the opposite. President Obama did this. How many times he did this? He says he's in support of law and order. He claims that he's a big advocate of it. Yet, guess what? He has Al Sharpton, who is sitting next to him. That's like me saying I am condemning the mafia and have John Gotti sitting next to me. It's true, exactly what Giuliani said. If you are condemning somebody, or a particular situation, or you are supporting, say, if you are supporting our men and women in blue who are sworn to serve and protect you, Mr. America, who are there to support you, Miss America, Mrs. America, then would I want somebody like Al Sharpton sitting next to me, who has repeatedly condemned the police departments, who have condemned them to, constantly. Like Giuliani said, that's the same thing as me saying I am totally against the mafia, which I am, but I have John Gotti sitting next to me. What kind of a message, though subliminal, what kind of a message is that giving those who are watching, the police officers, other people? What kind of a image is this projecting? Is this projecting, one that, I support it, but yet, if President Obama, now here's what I think he should have done. Every time that he comes out in support of our police officer or law enforcement agencies. He should have a chief of police sitting next to him. He should have the director of the FBI sitting next to him. That shows his support of our men and women in blue who are sworn to serve and protect. But to have a guy like Al Sharpton, who is anti-police, and he has spewed so much hatred towards police. You've heard him in Ferguson. You've heard him out here in New York. You've heard him elsewhere. You even heard him on his own show. How much he despises our police. Al Sharpton. And yet they're giving this guy a show. You know what would really be the cat's meow? Write to MSNBC and say, hey, look, you got to get this guy off, because not only is he against our men and women in blue, but he is so condescending of others. He is for civil rights, but in a radical way. If you've ever listened to Al Sharpton, or you've listened to Jesse Jackson, you will see how radical they actually are. The underlying tone of every one of their speeches is hate. They're not there to promote peace, tranquility, community involvement. They're, in some ways, they're calling for the overthrow of our police departments and everything. Is this what we want? Is this what we want? Do we want our very own president, President Obama, to put forth this sort of a image to the American people? Do we want our president to put forth I can only say it in the manner that it is an image in which you say one thing, but you are doing something else. You say you support law and order. You say you support, the community to come together, that the racial issues in this country be resolved. But yet you have some radical idiot like Al Sharpton sit next to you at that conference table. 83 times Al Sharpton went to the White House. 83. Would you want Al Sharpton sitting at your kitchen table if you were sitting there and you were trying to talk about a way to improve police relations? Would you want Al Sharpton or Jesse Jackson? I know I wouldn't. There's no way in hell I'd have either one of them sitting at a discussion table about this. I would pick individuals of the community, yes, of the community. But if I were talking about law enforcement and a means to mend racial tension in those areas, I would, number one, talk to all the black police officers, as many as I possibly could, get their input. I would try to have a member of the police department, a chief of police, who's highly recommended, who is black, sitting next to me. Given President Obama's current situation, he is black. So why not have a black chief of police sitting next to him? Why not have Eric Holder, who still is our Attorney General, sitting next to him? Why not have somebody like that who shows, number one, I'm black. Yes. Number two, there is issue with race here in the United States. And yet I am a member of the law enforcement community. Why not have somebody like that? Why not have somebody like that sitting next to me? Not an Al Sharpton. like I said earlier, that's the same thing as me saying I am definitely against the mafia. I am, I'm all out to break up the mafia, to wipe it off of the planet, and yet I've got John Gotti sitting right next to me to talk about this. Boy, that don't make any damn sense, does it? That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And yet this is the image our president put forth. Now, while I do not agree with what the police officers in New York City did to Mayor de Blasio by turning their back on the big screen during the funeral of one of the slain officers, I do not agree with that, and I think every single one of those officers should take a hard look at what they did. That was not the time nor the place for such action. If de Blasio was giving a generalized speech about law enforcement and not at a funeral, then I probably would have said, okay, turn your backs on him. You know, you don't want to hear it because he's waffled so many times. How many times has he come out against New York's finest? And yet I am looking at things over and over and over across the country about different law enforcement agencies who have turned a very big corner regarding race relations and how they treat individuals. And you know the one city that stands out most of all? The one city that stands out most of all that has actually become proactive in what they are doing to empower not only their officers, but to gain respect from the community. Now I want you to think about that for a second. What community do you, or what city, it's not a community, what city do you think that is? And you're going to be surprised when I tell you. It's Los Angeles, home of the Watts riots. Los Angeles has turned the corner, and they should be applauded for what they have done. This is the kind of law enforcement that we need. Law enforcement officers who adhere to the law, abide by the law, but they are not in such a category as we have heard from other police departments where officers have shot unarmed people. You know, we've had that. We've heard it over and over again that a white cop shoots a black kid or a black guy. You know, the guy doesn't have a gun, or, you know, it's just a fact that here it's a white cop shooting a black officer. Well, guess what, folks? Since the event in New York City of those two police officers being killed, I know of several other cases where officers have been killed in the line of duty. And if you don't believe me, go to the internet, search it out. It happened in Florida. It happened in Arizona. A officer who had only been on the force for 1 year was shot dead. These people, these men and women, put their lives on the line every day the second they put on that uniform. And yet there are so many people out there that are willing to jump on the bandwagon and condemn our men and women in blue, but yet you fail to realize the second you put on that uniform, you become a potential target. If you don't believe me, look at New York City. They were literally assassinated by a guy who had gone on Facebook and social media and said, you know, I'm going to do this. Actually asked people to come and watch what he was going to do. And then you have a recent incident right here in St. Louis, where once again the race card came out, in which a officer shot dead another black man, and it caused a lot of problems. It caused a lot of problems. But yet, guess what? In this particular case, they found the gun. Yes, they found the gun next to the body. And that gun had a serial number basically filed off. But yet, everyone's saying, oh, that guy was innocent, he didn't have a gun, blah, blah, blah. But yet there's the gun, there's the dead guy, there's proof the guy had a gun, and he did indeed intend to use it at a police officer because he drew the weapon and aimed it at the police officer. What the hell did you expect that cop to do? Sit there and wait till he was shot? Is that what we're telling all of our police officers? Until a suspect shoots first, you don't do anything. You know what our crime rate will be like if that happens? If a guy points a gun at me and I'm wearing blue, I got news for you. I'll probably do the same thing. I will give the guy a quick warning. If he does not adhere and he looks like he's got that, it has that gun in his hand, I'm going to pop around. I'm going to take him out. Simple. I'm going to go home at the end of my shift. And this is what you have to understand. Our men and women, those who are sworn to serve and protect, face every day. You know what the worst call any police officer can go to, and I can attest to this firsthand, because while I was in the military, I was a military police officer. And do you know what the scariest situation is for any police officer? The number one most scary situation is a domestic violence. The number two is walking up to a car. Those are probably the scariest situations of any police officer, because in a domestic violence, what turns out to be an argument could end up deadly to the police officer. When you walk up to a car because you pulled it over because it has a busted taillight, expired plates, the guy broke the speed limit. That's another situation because the driver's there. He could have a gun as you're approaching, and all he has to do is stick his head out and pull the trigger, and you're down. Those are probably the two scariest situations of any police officer, especially when he's by himself. So before you condemn our men and women in blue, and in President Obama's case, before you want to show the world, show America that you want to empower, to support our police departments, our men and women in blue, you better think again of who you're having sitting next to you. It sure in hell wouldn't be Al Sharpton. It sure in hell shouldn't be Jesse Jackson. Those are not the people anybody should want if they're talking about law enforcement and they're talking about a way to improve community relations between law enforcement and any community. I don't care if it's the Asian community. I don't care if it's the Arab community, the Islam community, the Muslims. I don't care if it's them. I don't care if it's black. I don't care if you're green. But when you talk about a ongoing ability to show support for those men and women in blue, Mr. President, do not put Al Sharpton next to you. Do not put Al Sharpton. Do not put Jesse Jackson next to you when you make those discussions. It's as simple as that, because you're not portraying an approval or support. You are showing the absolute opposite. This is not what we want to do, Mr. President. This is not what we want to do. Like I said earlier, that would be the same as me saying I am totally in condemnation of the mafia and I have John Gotti sitting right next to me. Think about it, Mr. President. And with that, it is time for me to get out of here. Stay tuned, because coming up here at the bottom of the hour, Ed Till will be with you all the way up until 4 o'clock this afternoon. Until tomorrow, 6 a.m., this is Bob Williams. Take care of yourselves.